Good morning, and what a beautiful morning it is. I'd like to welcome you together as we gather today in person and in Zoom to begin our first service of this new year, 2023. My name is Lisa Anderson, and I'm your worship associate today. My pronouns are she, hers. Our called minister, Reverend Linda Susan, is on family leave until the end of the month, and we send them and their family much love. And special thanks to this community for the outpouring of support we have received from the staff and this community as we continue to co-create worship together and carry out the ministries of USNH. I want to make a special shout out to Jesse Greist, who is shouldering so much extra work on top of his many other commitments to us in his usual creative, kind, and impactful way. Thanks, Jesse. Whoever you are, whoever you love, you are welcome here. For those of you who are here for the first time or not for a long time, we are especially glad that you have chosen to be with us. We are a people of many beliefs, many origins, sexualities, and genders. It's a personal pleasure for me to welcome Jamie Johnson to our pulpit. Following the death of my mom in February 2022, my sister Tricia and I joined the bereavement group she co-facilitates here at USNH. She is truly a gift to this community and our denomination. So let me tell you a little bit about her. Jamie, her pronouns are she, hers, is a candidate for the Unitarian Universalist Ministry and will graduate with her MDiv from Chicago Theological Seminary this spring. She is also a chaplain at Stanford Health, and she previously earned a PhD in art history and oversaw the educational programs in art museums in New York City and also in Chicago. She has been a member at USNH since 2012. She has served on the lay ministry teams and taught religious education. She'll be conducting a workshop on compassionate listening at USNH at the end of the month. Jamie lives in Stratford with her wife, Virginia, and their 17-year-old twins, Taya and Nate. Now for just a few announcements. Please join us for our soup luncheon immediately after the service, hosted by our indomitable Sunday morning team. If you're visiting us for the first time or perhaps are new enough to USNH that you have questions about Unitarian Universalists and our congregation, grab a cup of soup and coffee in the social hall and join us today in room 2009. And that's just upstairs on the left. And there we'll have our monthly visitors chat right after the service. And this is sponsored by the Connections team. Now, the USNH Heart team is working hard to restore the monthly dinners for the homeless at Columbus House. First, they need to assess the commitment and interest of our community to assist with this important social justice initiative. Many of you received details in an email from Robert Garkoff, and now I'm asking that you watch for more information in this week's newsletter. Participation is only a few times in the year, and that is all that is required. Now, we're also inviting you to help us reimagine and revitalize our USNH community. As we emerge from the pandemic phase of COVID, much has changed. We cannot go back to the way things were. Rather, we have exciting opportunities to create the congregation of our future. The Budget Planning Task Force is conducting focus groups, including one this Tuesday at 1 to 2:30, and there's room in that one, and we want everyone to participate. The discussions we have so far have been thoughtful and creative. You can sign up for a group in the social hall right after the service, and we'll be announcing more openings in the newsletter as well. And finally, Laura Pate and I will be available during the soup luncheon to answer questions. So now I invite you to settle in for worship and put your devices on worship mode.
Happy New Year. A reading from We Come Together Without Creed by Maureen Killeran. In this free church, we come together without creed, focusing instead on the core values of justice, equity, and compassion, of mutual acceptance of our diverse ways of being, as we seek to connect ourselves more fully with the unfolding truths of life and of our world. We come together in the shared conviction that all people deserve a voice in matters that concern them, and that it is up to each of us to protect the rights of all, particularly those who, for whatever reason, have long been held in silence. We come together in the stubborn belief that community is possible and that peace is more than a dream. We commit together to affirm in our actions, as well as our words, the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. We come together in awareness of our interdependence with all humanity and with the wider web of existence, for that too is part of what is meant by we. In this free church, we come together without creed, believing that the way we live in the world bears testament to the value of our beliefs. We light this chalice as a beacon of hope for who have gathered here this day, for all who have ever walked through our doors, for those who may yet find this spiritual home, and for those whose paths will never come our way. For all this, and for all those things we dare to hope and dream, we kindle our chalice flame for today.
Covenant lies at the center of how Unitarian Universalists gather in community. We're united not by a particular set of beliefs, but by the promises we make about how we will be together, how we will treat each other, and how we will seek to mend relationships when we fall short of our aspirations. A shortened version of our covenant appears in our order of service. But instead of reading the covenant today or just one element, let me lift up a framework for thinking about covenant that Becky Sandman shared with me from a UU course she took and others did from our congregation, entitled Claiming Our Spiritual Leadership. I'm borrowing liberally from the handout that Becky gave me. As we begin this new year together, then, I invite us to consider the ways to engage in a more liberating practice of covenant, as opposed to an approach that centers on covenant as a behavioral restraint. And by behavioral restraint, I mean that as a sort of limitation and a focus on good manners. A liberating covenant moves us towards beloved community where everyone can bring their whole selves. Now, this kind of covenant calls forth our full presence with one another in authenticity and spiritual vulnerability. If we think of our covenant as a liberating covenant, we focus on the spirit much more than the words. This view recognizes that we are both keeping and breaking promises at the same time and striving to do better. It is inherently forgiving when violated, and it seeks restoration and reconciliation. UU Minister Victoria Safford captures this well when she urges that covenant be reinforced by forgiveness and grace when we stumble or forget. It's this way we can find our way back to one another in community and love.
Good morning, I'm Christopher Grundy, the Director of Music at USNH. I invite you all to rise in body or in spirit and join in singing number 38 in the Gray Hymnal, Morning Has Broken.
Good morning. My name is Jesse Grice, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. So, what do we do when we're struggling? When we're having a hard time, where do we turn? The answer is different for each and every one of us, though I imagine the desire for safety, for sanctuary, for safe space is probably something that all people feel. For some of us, that safe and sacred space might be found right inside our home. For others, it might be found in a place like USNH, might be found in an object like a photograph, a stuffed animal, a blanket. There are people who seek out a particular place in nature, away from others when they're struggling, while others might find that same safe space on a dance floor in the middle of a bustling city. For me, there are two levels on which to answer the question of where I turn when I'm struggling. The first is about space. I have a special place in the forest behind the house that I grew up in, North Haven, under a particular mountain laurel. And when I go to that special place, something in me automatically relaxes. I release all the tension or worry or fear or even anger that I might be holding inside. But you know what? That's the thing. The place is very helpful, but what about when I'm not there or not able to go there? If a person has a safe object, can they be safe without it? If we have a special place that triggers relaxation for us, can we relax when we're not there? I've often asked myself if I depend too much on a particular safe space, and if my need to go there can actually wind up getting in the way of my healing or growing or relaxing in the times when I can't go there. Also, if I have to be there to be safe, how can I possibly be anywhere else at any time? In the epic Indian poem, the Mahabharata, Krishna says to Arjuna, "While thinking about objects that calm our senses, be careful you don't get attached too much to the object itself. Attachment can lead to desire, which can lead to anger when the object isn't there." Later on, the Buddha used the word upadana when talking about getting attached to something. But that word, upadana, it doesn't mean attachment, although oftentimes we see it translated as attachment. The actual literal translation of that word is fuel, like gasoline. Buddha warns us that we need to be in a calming place in order to be calm. Buddha warns us that if we need to be in a calming place in order to be calm, or to have a comfort object in order to be comforted, that need itself can be like fuel, like gas, feeding a fire instead of putting it out. So let's try something real quick here together. And hopefully this can be a seed that you can plant into your daily spiritual practice. As you are willing, I ask you for just one moment to close your eyes and imagine your own answer to the question, where do you go? Or what do you hold on to when you are struggling? Imagine that safe place or that object that you hold, whatever it is. Hold that picture in your mind. If you can picture that place or that object in your mind, you have successfully planted the spirit of that place or that object within you. It is with you, even when you are not with it. Make space for that safe place or object in your mind, in your imagination, in your inner self. Let it live there. When you are struggling or worried or frightened, if you cannot physically go to your safe space or hold your special object, perhaps you can close your eyes, like right now, and let it find you. And in that finding, you just might feel a little bit more peace or comfort within you. May it be so. We will now sing our children off to their religious education classes. The words are in your order of service, and I'll start us going. Our roots go down, down to the earth. Our roots go down, down to the earth. Our roots go down, down to the earth. Our roots go down. Our roots go down, down to the earth. Our roots go down, down to the earth. Our roots go down, down to the earth. Our roots go down.
We're now at the time of our service where we lift up joys and sorrows of this community. It's with great sadness we share with you the passing of Elizabeth Betty Mettler, a longtime member of USNH. She was a past president, and many of you will remember that she hosted many USNH meetings in her home, which was located directly behind USNH on Ridge Road. She will be missed. Emily McCabe writes that she's doing well following surgery and taking the needed time to recover. She sends her best wishes to everyone for the new year. And I'll end with this joy. We are overjoyed to share that former Waverly youth Robert Champ Long Jr. signed a letter of intent on Wednesday, December 21st, to play quarterback for the Maryland Terrapins. Congratulations to Champ and his family. So together, let us give thanks for this community of care and love.
And now I invite you to join me in the spirit of meditation, first spoken and then silent. This is a charm for hope, a string from Reverend Teresa Inez Soto. This is a charm for hope. The first thing to do is tie a string around your finger. Remember that you are not alone. Think of the ways that our best shared futures are braided inextricably with our present and your destiny. The second thing is to untie the string and let the knots and the tightness fall away. Let the burden of bleakness roll off your shoulders. Resistance on these opaque horizons only requires one source of strength, one ray of light. Remember that persistence doesn't require all the answers up front, only one. Fortunately for all of us, we have one response: to remain together through awkward times and happy ones. We remember and we find our resolve in one another.
Good morning. So good to see everyone here, our first service of 2023. My name is Holly Hawkins, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm currently on the stewardship committee, and through that work, I hope to get to know many more of you in the coming weeks. I have a few visual aids to help me share my testimonial this morning. Let's start with our basic orange personal flotation device, or PFD. 5 years ago, my husband Keith purchased a 30-foot sailboat, and for those of you who are interested, it's a CNC MK2 vintage 1987. He named her Dancer, and with Dancer came these old but serviceable orange collars, sufficient for the Coast Guard requirement of a PFD per onboard passenger. Somewhat uncomfortable, bulky, but serviceable. It keeps you afloat with your head above water if you're unexpectedly in the drink. So my parallel to USNH, in 1997, our family of 4 with 2 young children was new to the area, no local family, and little social connections. I felt we needed a PFD of sorts to keep our family afloat in case of emergency, or just to make our family lives more secure and enjoyable. I walked into USNH after a yellow page, remember those? Search for a Unitarian church. I didn't know a soul here. And the first year was a little awkward and uncomfortable, like this orange PFD, but I kept coming as I felt it was necessary. Change. Okay, as the years went on and I became involved in RE teaching, long-range planning, stewardship, music committee, and the board of trustees, and 13 years in a row of family fun at the Labor Day retreat, the friendships I made in those years and the spirituality I was able to explore, the fit of USNH became like this vest upgrade, more comfortable and less awkward. In fact, when our dear family friend Lisa Coleman died unexpectedly, this community literally lifted me up and kept my head above water as I overcame the grief of her death. One more. Let's see, this is the new model. Here we go. Okay, now our kids are grown and we're empty nesters. We still have Dancer and have become much more comfortable sailing in Long Island Sound and hopefully going further afield this summer. Time for a very comfortable and sleek PFD. We just got these this Christmas. And in parallel, I have learned to get more comfortable with my fit at USNH. In my 25 years here, the role of this community has buoyed me and made our families' lives richer. I have not always found it smooth sailing here. There have been committee disagreements, disappointments with ministers leaving, and seeing many friends leave or just fade out of our community. But the commitment I have to USNH as my life's PFD is unwavering. And that means as I continue to grow and change in this community, Keith and I will continue to financially support USNH. We want this religion and our USNH to be here as a lifeline for anyone who needs it in the years and decades to come. Like a well-fitted PFD, USNH can carry you and me and anyone who needs it through life's rough waters. Thank you.
Thanks, Holly. We've arrived at the time in our service where we lift up the practice of generosity, and we talk about our financial support of the ministries of this beloved community. We don't have a membership fee or dues. We're wholly dependent on our shared financial contributions. So let's act from a place of abundance and not scarcity. You can contribute on site to us at usnh.org. You can mail a contribution to our physical address at 700 Hartford Turnpike in Hamden. And finally, there are plates near the exits where you can place a contribution at the end of the service. Many, many thanks to all of you for supporting USNH.
A reading from Valerie Kaur. I believe that deep wisdom resides within each one of us. Some call this voice by different sacred names: Spirit, God, Jesus, Allah, Om, Buddha nature, Wahaguru. Others think of this voice as the intuition one hears when in a calm state of mind. Whatever name we choose, listening to our deepest wisdom requires disciplined practice. The loudest voices in the world right now are ones running on the energy of fear, criticism, and cruelty. But I must not lose myself at the feet of others. My most vigilant spiritual practice is finding the seconds of solitude to get quiet enough to hear the wise woman in me. Thank you so much, choir and Bill, for the inspiring and beautiful music this morning. Beloveds of the Unitarian Society of New Haven, I am so grateful to be here this morning, though I wish it were under different circumstances rather than Linda Susan's emergency family leave. To Reverend Linda Susan and their family, I send continued hopes for peace and well-being. Irish poet William Butler Yeats pessimistically wrote on the future in his poem, The Second Coming, having just witnessed World War I, the flu pandemic, and the beginning of the Irish War of Independence. He speaks not of a positive second coming in the Christian sense, but the arrival of a slouching beast. The poem begins, turning and turning in the wandering gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The traditional values and institutions of Yeats's world were falling apart and could not hold him or society together any longer. Written in 1919, the poem seems to predict rising fascism and the horrors of the Shoah and World War II. I wonder if the center, our center specifically as Unitarian Universalists, can hold in the midst of the crises with which we are faced today. A year of war in Ukraine, repeated mass shootings in schools and stores, the continued violence of white supremacy, the paralysis of Congress demonstrated so clearly this week, and personally, the isolation and loss of 3 years of COVID. The list is long and well known to all of us. In many ways, we are both the falconer of Yeats's verse, who has lost control of our falcon, and the falcon who is adrift on the currents. But what is our core, our center of Unitarian Universalism? More basically, is there a core? And why does it matter? Unlike our monotheistic cousins, our denomination does not rely upon a single deity or scripture. We say nothing about the end times or life after death. Individually, we hold many disparate views on these topics. But this lack of traditionally religious concepts has led some to say that we are a philosophy, not a religion or faith. As the recent UUA report, Widening the Circle of Concern, states, it is our theological framework that differentiates us as a faith from a social club. Now, I use the word faith not in the theistic sense of belief in God or gods. Instead, I borrow from UU humanists like Peter Sampson, who writes about faith as a state of mind, an attitude with a sense of wider relatedness. I would suggest that when UUs talk of faith, we are talking about a trust in our interconnectedness, in our community, and in our world. A trust in something that is larger than we are and can be known by names such as nature, or love, or creation, or the spirit of life. Dr. Anthony Penn, a professor of theology at Rice University and a UU humanist who focuses on creating an understanding of African American humanist theology, he believes that theology is possible without a transcendental concept of the divine. He writes, quote, "Theology is a method for critically engaging, articulating, and discussing the deep existential and ontological issues endemic to human life." Or, as Reverend Forrest Church writes more succinctly, "Religion is our human response to the dual reality of being alive and knowing we must die." As many of you know from Lisa's very kind introduction, I am currently finishing my master's degree at Chicago Theological Seminary, hoping to graduate in April. It's a progressive Christian seminary, which I chose because I wanted to learn more about Christianity. While Christianity is not my faith, it is the religion of many of the people that I serve as a hospital chaplain, and it informs so much of our cultural context. So I spend a lot of time reading about Christian theology and translating it into a broader Unitarian Universalist language, inspired by the work of Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt, who was here for Reverend Linda Susan's installation, Reverend Dr. Rebecca Ann Parker, and others. I do this not only because it's required for class, but because such a theological framework allows me to communicate our ideas to others outside of our faith, and frankly helps me to explore what I believe, following our fourth principle of our continued search for meaning and truth. But such discussions of theological centers are not merely academic, as we have seen in recent years. And here is the history part of today's sermon. In 1997, the General Assembly passed a resolution dedicating itself to the dismantling of racism. Later, the Committee on Institutional Change gathered religious leaders of color to reflect upon and propose denominational changes to dismantle racism. That report was called Widening the Circle of Concern. There is a faction within our denomination that believes that our focus on anti-oppression and anti-racist work has moved us beyond historical Unitarian Universalist concerns. Indeed, a recent candidate for the UUA Board of Trustees went so far as to suggest that young and marginalized people who wanted to take our religion in a profoundly different direction should form a separate branch of Unitarian Universalism, perhaps calling them the 21st century UUs. And so, as Dr. Penn suggests, theology addresses our very real issues in our denomination today. So what is our center? My Christian, Muslim, and Jewish classmates describe their religious centers in terms of history, rituals, scripture, community. As Unitarian Universalists, we trace our own history backwards through our merger in 1961, the flowering of our separate faiths in the US in the 19th century, all the way back to Transylvania and Italy in the 16th century with Michael Servetus, Queen Isabella Socinus, and other proto-Unitarians. Some historians even trace our Universalist roots back to the 2nd century with Origen. We have rituals and traditions, the water ceremony, the flower communion, our blessing of babies, and the signing of our new book for members. Excuse me. We have the symbol of our chalice, designed by artist Hans Deutsch for the Unitarian service community that was helping people escape from the Nazis. And while these are all valuable and important aspects of our culture and our history, I suggest that they are not the center of who we are. So what is? Is it our community? Is it our minister? Is it the ritual of coming here on Sunday mornings? Perhaps you're drawn to the social justice activities, the choir, our religious education programs. Perhaps it's our commitment to being a welcoming congregation with our rainbow flag and our pronouns on our name tags, or our affirmation of beloved community and our Black Lives Matter banner. These are all very important to who we are, but I think these are, in many ways, the outward manifestation of our faith. So what is that center? What is the proverbial blankie or stuffed animal or hideaway of Unitarian Universalists when everything around us is falling apart, both individually and collectively? Until recently, I think I would have answered that our principles were our core. It's a statement of our vision of our haven here on earth that we strive to co-create. I've tried to memorize them. I've used them teaching my children. I'm partial to the first and the last one, that we respect the inherent dignity of everyone and that we are all connected in the inherent worth in the interdependent web of life. This was before we adopted the 8th principle here in our congregation. Unitarian Universalists envision the recognition of every person's worth, the achievement of freedom for all of us to pursue our truths, a time when societies are conducted with justice, equality, and democratic processes, and a world that is filled with peace, compassion, and connection. This is our vision. The 8th principle, which our congregation has adopted, points out that some of the greatest threats to this vision, this aspiration, are racism and oppression, both individually and systematically, and we commit to oppose that injustice. Taken all together, these principles paint us as a hopeful people who believe in the possibility of transformation. And as a denomination, we are in the midst of transformation. The Board of Trustees has charged a commission with examining and revising Article 2, of our bylaws, the specific section that contains our principles and sources. Article 2 was last updated 30 years ago. And so the current charge requests, quote, revisions that will enable our UUA, our member congregations, and our covenanted communities to be a relevant and powerful force for spiritual and moral growth, healing, and injustice. Proposed changes should articulate core UU theological values. The charge continues. Quote, Dr. Cornel West says that, quote, justice is what love looks like in public. Justice is what love looks like in public. Our commitment to personal, institutional, and cultural change rooted in anti-oppression, anti-racism, and multiculturalism values and practices is love in action and should be centered in any revision of Article 2. The new principles and purposes should give us in the transformation of ourselves, our communities, and our faith into active networks of collective care, restoration, and justice. The principles and purposes you will prepare should be a living document that challenges Unitarian Universalists to place the liberation in all its dimensions of all at the center of our lives. So that was the charge. The Article 2 Study Commission has been conducting focus groups and research and reconsidering every aspect of our stated principles and purposes and our sources. And they have drafted a new document, which they released in September, and which will come up for a vote at this summer's General Assembly. You can find this draft, if you haven't already seen it, on the UUA website, under Governance and Management, and then under the Article 2 Study Commission. I'm curious, just by a show of hands, how many people have read anything about Article 2? Okay, good. The document's just a short 3 pages long, and a big part of it is an image. It describes our Unitarian Universalist core as a collection of values. Love is at the center, orbited by justice, generosity, transformation, pluralism, equity, and independence. Each value is described. For example, love is the enduring force that holds us together. And then there is a statement of covenant. Quote, as Unitarian Universalists in religious community, we covenant congregation to congregation, and through our association to support and assist each other in engaging our ministries, we draw from our heritages of freedom and reason, hope and courage, building on the foundation of love. Now, while the format and wording have changed from the previous article with our well-known principles, the ideas remain essentially the same. A spirit of hope, ethical and spiritual transformation, diversity, the interdependent web of all existence, and dismantling oppression. And in many ways, these ideas are not so different from other progressive faiths which embrace the golden rule and social justice. But this article, this new article, has something which I believe is unique to our faith, the idea of covenant or promise. Not a covenant between a Godhead and a people, but between and among people, person to person, individually and collectively, the one and the many. The word covenant appears 10 times throughout the document. For me, this is the center of Unitarian Universalism, our center that holds us. It's our covenant. As Lisa said at the beginning, covenant lies at the center of how Unitarian Universalists gather in community. We are united not by a particular set of beliefs, and I would add, not by the wording or number of our principles, but by the promises we make about how we will be together, how we will treat each other, and how we will seek to mend relationships when we fall short of our aspirations. We covenant or promise to work together to understand ourselves, the world we live in, and to work to transform both based on our shared values. Our covenant acknowledges that we are social creatures, that we exist through relationships, and that we are often our best selves in community. To go back to Yeats, I suggest another image. Instead of the lone bird beholden to a single person commanding it from the ground, I want to instead insert an image that is common along the Connecticut shore in the fall. Imagine a kettle of birds of prey, eagles, kestrels, sharp-shinned hawks, ospreys, peregrine falcons, rising together on the thermals, swirling together overhead as they begin their journey of migration. We are like that kettle, diverse in our individuality, together on a journey. While blood-tinged tides and anarchy and authoritarianism are around us, we have promised ourselves and each other that we won't give up on our vision of a better world. Yes, there is a center, and our center is us.
I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join me in singing number 100, I've Got Peace Like a River, and we will sing verses 1 through 4. Joy like a fountain. Love like an ocean. Pain like an arrow.
Please join me in the words we use to extinguish the chalice, which you'll find in your order of service or in the chat on the live stream. Together, let us say, we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of our community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
May today and the days ahead bring you hope and peace and healing and the chance to share those with others. Amen. Blessed be.